Traditional tapering and peaking for testing your 1 rep max is dead, in my opinion. You know that old school strength programming approach where just before maxing out, in the weeks leading up, you'll drop the volume down, you reduce sets, and then you ramp the intensity up, and then you come into competition and you're supposed to hit PRs. Now, this approach sometimes will result in a PR, but in my experience, oftentimes it won't and you'll perform poorly. In this video, I'm going to share with you my own peaking strategy that is very reliable, we don't change many variables, and it's worked exceptionally well for myself and many national and international level strength athletes. And if you want me to personally write your peaking approach, I'll set your training program up so that you perform at your best when you come to test maxes. Top link in the description, you can book a call with me and hire me as your personal strength coach, or a second link if you want to run my programs that use this peaking approach. So let's get straight into it. So most of you are familiar with the traditional model of peaking and tapering to go and test your 1 rep maxes, right? A lot of the old school strength coaches and programs use this approach where basically in the weeks leading up to competitions, you might have a 12-week training program, and in the final 3 or 4 weeks, you will notice that volume starts to taper down. So we drop some sets off each training session and the intensity starts to ramp up. So a typical approach might be, let's say you've been doing 5 sets of 5 at 70%. That might begin to transition into a 3x3 at 80%, for example. So lower volume, the intensity is higher. And then on the week of competition or 1 rep max testing, you might take the whole week off, or you might just have a couple light training sessions. Like on the Monday, you might do your openers. On the Wednesday, you might do your final warm-ups, and then you have a couple days off, and then you do competition. And I used this approach for many years, and I used it with my clients as well. I ran a bunch of training templates that used this approach. I followed other coaches doing this, and it never really worked. I felt terrible when I used this approach, and so did my clients and my friends who I trained with, because there's so much unpredictability. There's so many kind of spinning wheels and changing variables. Like, it didn't make any sense to me that just before competition, we're going to drastically increase the intensity, we're going to drop the volume, we're going to change all these different things. Then the week off didn't make any sense to me because I come in feeling detrained. And even if I took the approach where I do a couple light sessions before the competition or max testing, like everything felt so heavy. Even if I was only working up to my openers on that Monday, they felt way heavier than usual. My confidence was shot. And then I would come into testing and it would fall apart just because so many things have changed. Everything feels heavy. I felt really beat up and fatigued. Like the week of competition, I used to feel terrible with joint pains and aches everywhere. And that kind of led me to making these changes and making my own version of peaking that I feel like is far more reliable. And I'm going to share that with you now. So this method of peaking, tapering, whatever you want to call it, I didn't invent or anything like that. It's kind of based loosely on Mike Tuchschere's reactive training systems. And then I kind of just made a few modifications based on my own experience, based on my own performance at competitions and stuff like that. So the way that I recommend that you peak in order for competition or for 1 rep max testing is like this. So first things first, you need to figure out your time to peak. Now, all this means is the length of each of your training blocks, okay? A mesocycle, 1 block of training. For most people, that's going to be around 4 to 6 weeks for most of you watching this. And the simple way that you figure that out, you basically write yourself 1 week of training, a microcycle. You then run that week of training until you can no longer add weight to the bar. So we're basically trying to look for how long it takes you to get to a peak in performance. For myself, my training blocks are 5 weeks in length, okay? I know that every training block I run, week 1, I feel pretty terrible. Week 2, meh. Week 3, average. Week 4, I feel pretty good. Week 5, I feel great. Then week 6, I fall off a cliff. Fatigue skyrockets. Week 7, I wouldn't be able to sustain. And that has led me to determine 5-week training blocks. Now, once you've determined that 5-week training block or that time to peak, it's very simple to set up your peak for a competition because you simply just line competition up with week 5, peak week, or even if you're just testing maxes in the gym. You know that, let's say your competition is 5 weeks away, you would do 4 weeks of training and competition falls on that 5th exposure, and it's that simple. There are a couple little tweaks and modifications that I make going into the competition, but I do that based on an individual basis. So with traditional peaking models, where they will taper the volume down, they drop the sets, they ramp the intensity up, I don't like that approach. There's too many changing variables. You're removing a lot of the stimulus that got you strong. Like, I often found that I do really well in a high volume block with more moderate to lower intensities. And then when I got to the peaking block, I felt terrible because that volume's dropped. That volume was the thing driving the stimulus. Taking that out made me feel really weak. Ramping the intensity up just led to my fatigue just going through the roof, and I performed really poorly because I'm so beat up. So with my approach, we literally just keep variables the same. So if you've been training year round with 5-week blocks and you use moderate to high volumes, you use low to moderate intensities, we're just going to do that into competition. You don't need to suddenly change a bunch of variables just because competition's coming up and kind of conventional wisdom says to do that. And I've got a bunch of clients who do doubles or triples into competition. They don't even do singles. And for myself, when I peak, my volume work, I'm still doing around like 70% for my volume work. And I don't even touch crazy heavy singles. I might do a single RPE 8, RPE 8.5 the week before a competition, but nothing drastic changes. So the way you would implement this into your programming is you find your time to peak. So I'm going to use myself as an example. My blocks need to be 5 weeks in length because I peak on that week 5. So that might look like a triple RPE 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, for example, on the week 5. Next block, I might do doubles, so 2 at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then for competition, I might do a single at 5, 6, 7, 8.5 the week before competition. And then competition is obviously the single at 10. Now, when it gets to the week of competition, so let's just say, for example, you're planning to test your maxes or compete in powerlifting on a Saturday, okay? So we've done 4 weeks of training. We're now in competition week, and competition is on the Saturday, okay? So this day 1 session, I'm going to do exactly the same. Normal week of training, normal training session. This might be my single at RPE 7 or 8. Day 2, normal training session. Day 3, normal training session. Now we're about 2 or 3 days out from competition. In these 2 or 3 sessions before competition, I might taper the volume a little bit. So the accessories, instead of 3 sets, I might drop to 1 set, or I might cut some out completely. For the main lifts, I might just do the top set, and then instead of 4 back-offs, I might do 2. And then I just take a day or 2 off before competition, and then I go compete. Competition is going to be the 5th exposure in that cycle. So we would do exposure 1, exposure 2, 3, 4. Competition on the Saturday is exposure number 5, and it keeps things really consistent. We're not drastically changing any variables. Block length stays the same. It becomes very predictable because we know that in our past 5 training blocks, we performed really well on week 5. So there's a very good chance that we're going to perform good at competition on week 5. We don't need to drastically go and change loads of things, introduce unpredictability, and kind of gamble on whether we're going to hit PRs or not. We know that on week 4, you've just hit a good single at RPE 8, 8.5. So you roughly know what you're capable of going into competition. And I found that this makes for a very predictable way of peaking. We don't feel excessively fatigued because we haven't ramped intensity up. We don't feel detrained because we haven't drastically dropped the volume down. It just feels like a normal week of training. And if I could give you any kind of pro tips for this peaking process, I would say if you're in doubt, change less variables, like literally just run it exactly the same as a normal training week. We would rather that you go into competition a little bit fatigued rather than being detrained, because there's no worse feeling than being detrained. The weight's going to feel so heavy on your back, so heavy in your hands on the bench press. I'd rather go in a little bit more tired, but actually like adapted and strong, if that makes sense. Another tip that I can give you is make sure that you plan in advance. So if you know that you've got like 20 weeks for your competition, get on a calendar and plan those weeks of training out, so that you don't get close to competition and realize like, oh shit, my time to peak's 5 weeks and I've got 8 weeks to go or something. So plan ahead of schedule so you don't get caught out. And then the final thing that I would say is just kind of dissociate your mind from traditional peaking strategies. Like, traditional peaking, it's not really rooted in any kind of like individual response or anything. It's just it's kind of based in logic, right? Like dropping volume reduces fatigue, increasing intensity makes things more specific, but that doesn't mean traditional peaking is going to work well for you. I would recommend that instead you just try this approach and make small changes based on each max out or each competition. Like if you notice something and it happens to go against traditional programming wisdom, go with it, because your individual response is way more important than some old school strength coach who's saying, oh, you have to do this intensity or you have to do singles before the meet. Like, no, you don't. It should be based on individual variation. So to give you an example from my own peaking, me and my coach figured out that in order for my squat to perform well, I need a heavy squat exposure a couple days before maxing out my squat. So for example, if I compete on a Saturday, on a Thursday, I usually take about 80% on the squat for 2 or 3 singles. That helps me to feel very primed for meet day. For some of you, that might lead to you feeling fatigued or beat up. So you just need to kind of play around with it and see what works for you. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that it helps you to kind of upgrade your peaking strategy. Don't just blindly follow traditional peaking just because people say it works. It might not work for you, so give this approach a try. If you want a free strength training program to go and run that incorporates some of these ideas, you can click on screen to go and follow mine. Any questions, comments and stuff like that on peaking, click down below and I will get back to you. And until next time, I'll catch you in the next video.